Efendim bu yağmurlu günde geldiğiniz için çok teşekkür ediyorum. İlginç bir seri başladık, konferans dizisi. Kavalalı Mehmed Ali Paşa. Tarihimizin çok tanınan bir şahsiyeti. Ve bizi ne kadar çok şey hem Osmanlı'ya hem onun büyük bir gayretle farklılaştığı, değiştirdiği Mısır'a götürüyor. Büyük bir reformcu. Osmanlı'nın reformlarından çok önce Mısır'ı farklı bir ülke haline getirmeyi azmetmiş bir kişi. Önce kumandan, başarılı bir kumandan, sonra da oğullarıyla bir kendi hanedanını kuran bir devlet yapıcısı diyelim. Şimdi onunla zannediyorum geçen sene Boğaziçi buluşmalarında Boğaziçi'nin ne kadar çok bugüne kalmış ilginç binasını onlara borçlu olduğumuzu gördük. Hidiv ailesine ve onların tarihine bir göz atmaya ve tarihimizin buluşma noktalarını incelemeye karar verdik. Ve çok mutluyuz ki bizi yalnız bırakmayan değerli dostlarımız oldu. Konferans vermek için buralara kadar gelen, uzun yollar kat eden ve biz bu tarihi incelemeye devam ediyoruz. Bugün ise iki çok değerli dostumu burada ağırlamaktan, sizlerle buluşturmaktan mutluluk duymaktayım. Bir tanesi Profesör Heath Lowry. Bizim üniversitelerimizin çok yakından tanıdığı bir şahsiyettir. Ve ben az önce konuşmalarımızda Sabancı ailesinin bile benimki Sakıp Bey'in rahmetli zamanında burada evken olmuşluğum var. Ama ondan da hayretle öğrendim ki meğerse Hacı Ömer Sabancı zamanında da gelmiş bu binaya. Onun için ona sadece hoş geldin demem lazım. Size kısaca bilgi vereyim. Elbette tanıyanınız çok ama Profesör Heath Lowry Oregon doğumlu ve hayatını Türkiye'ye adamış bir kişi. Türkiye'ye ilk kez 64-66 yıllarında geldi. O zamanın Barış Gönüllüleri projesi vardı. Gençlerin daha sonraki dönemlerde dünyanın bu kadar kaynaşmadığı birbiriyle, gençlerin farklı ülkeleri tanımadığı yıllarda, en azından Türkiye için, bir avuç gönüllü üniversite öğrencisi ya da henüz bitirmiş gencin gelip Türkiye'yi keşfettiği, incelediği ve daha sonraki eğitim yıllarına da büyük etkisi olmuş çalışmalar yaptığı yıllar. 93-2011 yıllarında Princeton Üniversitesi'nde Osmanlı ve Modern Türkiye Kürsüsü'nde Atatürk Kürsüsü profesörü oldu. Daha sonra Boğaziçi Üniversitesi'nin tarih bölümünün kurucu üyelerindendir. 73-80 yılları arasında Boğaziçi Üniversitesi'nde ders verdi. Uzmanı olduğu erken dönem Osmanlı tarihi üstüne sayısız eseri var. Bu eserlerin bir bölümünü daha sonra dışarıda sergilemekteyiz. Onları tanımayan, görmeyen için de bir fırsattır. 83'te Washington DC'de kurulan Türk Araştırmaları Enstitüsü'nün kurucu üyeleri ve uzun sürede bu kurumunun yöneticiliğini yaptı. Halen Bahçeşehir Üniversitesi'nde mütevelli heyeti başkanı, danışmanlığı ve Osmanlı ve Türk tarihi uygulamaları ve araştırma genel koordinatörlüğü ve tarih yüksek lisans programı koordinatörlüğünü yapmakta. Bugün bize Makedonya ve Kavalalı ailesi hakkında çok ilginç bir konferans verecek. Daha sonraki konuşmacımızı da izin verin anlatmaya. Bugün iki tane değerli Türk dostu konuşmacımız var. Bayan Anna Missirian. Efendim bir şey söylemem önce telefonlarını kapatmanız gerekecek. Çünkü buradaki simultane çeviri cihazıyla ve o sistemle birbirine çakışıyor. Kaparsanız bu cızırtılardan da kurtulacağımızı ummaktayım. Bayan Anna Missirian, Kavala'daki, bilemiyorum yolunuz Kavala'ya düştü mü? Aslında sınırımızdan 1-2 saat mesafede bir eski Osmanlı şehri diyebilirim. Ve orada Mehmet Ali Paşa, Kavalalı Mehmet Ali Paşa için doğduğu ev hala kullanılıyor. Hala bir ziyaret edilebiliyor. Ve bir de onun yaptığı bir inanılmaz imaret var ve Bayan Anna Missirian'ın gayretiyle günümüze kadar ulaşmış ve inanılmaz bir misafirhaneye dönüşmüş. Her açıdan görünce yani insanın gözleri dolacak kadar bizi duygulandırdı. Kendisinin imaretin başkanlığını yapıyor. Burası bir kültür ve sanat kompleksi. Biz de onlarla çok başarılı bir işbirliği yaptık. Türk çocuklarının ve Yunan çocukları ile birlikte katıldığı bir eğitim programı yaptık. Bir sanatçının gözetiminde ve daha sonra önce Kavala'da sonra da onlar Türkiye'ye geldiler. Ve bunun bu kadar sınır komşuluğumuzun ve geçmiş tarihimiz için de önemli bir katkı olduğunu düşünüyorum. Orada pek çok böyle sanat etkinlikleri gerçekleşiyor ve Yunanistan'daki Kavala halkı da özellikle bu gençler ve çocuklarla ilgili faaliyetlere katılıyor ve kentin Osmanlı kimliğini kaybetmeden kalmış nadir bölgelerinden biri gerçekten. Yani Türkiye'de herhangi bir mahallede görebileceğimizden çok daha fazla Osmanlı evini, sivil mimarisini görebiliriz. Birisidir. Onun için bu iki ilginç konferans için size geldiğiniz için teşekkür ediyorum. Bir şey daha var. Biz Kavalalı ailesiyle ilgili hem Neslişah Sultan'ın ki ailenin bir parçası oraya gelin gidiyor. Hem onun çocuklarından, değerli varislerinden aldığımız eserleri hem de çok sevgili başka bir dostum ne yazık ki artık aramızda değil. Honik Benardette'nin ömrü boyunca topladığı hidivlere ait malzemeyle biz Atlı Köşk'te bir küçük sergi yaptık. Konferans sonrası bir küçük ikramımız var ama muhakkak o sergiyi de gezmenizi isteyeceğim sizden. Çünkü Osmanlı'ya varlık olunca nasıl yaşanması gerektiğini öğreten bir aile derler tarihçiler onlara. Ki gerçekten de Boğaziçi'ndeki bütün büyük yapılar, görkemli yapılar, bizim bu köşkümüz dahil onların bize bıraktığı mirastır. Onun için kendi tarihimiz için de bunları öğrenmekte fayda var diye düşünüyorum. Tekrar hoş geldiniz. Bu soğuk havada, yağmurlu havada geldiğiniz için ayrıca teşekkür borçluyum size. Sağ olun, var olun. Şimdi Profesör Heath Lowry'yi kürsüye davet ediyorum.
Allah, Nazan Hanım o kadar güzel bizi takdim ettiniz ki akşama kadar dinleyebilirdim. Yunanistan'dan gelen arkadaşların biraz düşünerek izninizle ben bugün İngilizce konuşacağım. Zaten yaşlandıkça benim Türkçe konuşmayı şeyini biraz kaybetmeye başladım. Boşuna boşuna Kavalalı Mehmed Ali Paşa demiyoruz. Çünkü doğduğu günden ölünceye kadar Kavala'daki bağları hiç kopmamıştır. Her ne kadar ben biraz Anna Missirian'ın sayesinden bu konuya ilgilenmeye başladım. Genellikle Nazan Hanım'ın söylediği gibi ben çok daha erken dönem üzerinde çalışıyorum. Ama İmaret yeni açıldığı zaman da 2004'te tesadüfle Ana Hanım'la tanıştık ve bayağı elindeki malzemeler benimle paylaşmaya hevesledi. I'm sorry, I was going to speak English, wasn't I? When I first met her, she was extremely gracious. Probably because I was the first person she'd ever met who knew anything about Ottoman history. I don't think I will insult her to say that up until that time she had really thought of this monument as a Egyptian monument, when in fact it is, of course, a classic Ottoman monument, both in architecture, style, and everything else. And it was with that in mind that with the long-term friend and associate, Ismail Erençal, we wrote the book, Remembering One's Roots, Aslına Dönüş, about Mehmed Ali. Kavala, as was pointed out, is a Macedonian port town, roughly 2/3 of the way from Istanbul to Selanik. It's on the sea and across from the island of Tassos. It is, if you haven't been there, a most beautiful town and one that is certainly worth visiting. It is topped by the peninsula that you see here, and 3 monuments in particular stick out. The first is the aqueduct, which was built by Kanuni's Sadrazam Makbul Ibrahim Pasha initially, and then rebuilt by Mehmed Ali Pasha. The castle, which while there had been a Byzantine castle there, had been destroyed by Evrenos Gazi when he conquered the area first in 1390, and was rebuilt by Yavuz Sultan Selim between 1512 and 1520. And third, the complex, the Külliye, built by Mehmed Ali Pasha. We call it the imaret today, but it was in fact a much more complex Külliye, as you will see in a moment. This is the, I'm not very good with these things. This is, this is the imaret complex, the Külliye, with the castle overshadowing it. From the air, this and many of the pictures I owe to Mrs. Missirian. From the air, this is how it looks today. To provide the needs, in particular the needs of water for this facility, Mehmed Ali reconstructed the magnificent su yolu, kemer, aqueduct in 1234, 1818, 1819, while the construction of the Külliye was still in progress. The problem with this peninsula is that there's no logical source of water, and that's why this was built initially and rebuilt by Mehmed Ali. After World War I and the population exchange, Mubadele, in 1923-24, it was used by immigrants from Asia Minor, housed them, really up until about 1930, which is the time I think that the Greek government finalized an arrangement whereby they deeded the title to this and other properties to the Evkaf Waqf in Egypt. When it finally came into Mrs. Missirian's possession, it was, to say the least, a mess. Much of it was in ruins. You see here the ablution fountain on the right and the kitchen of the imaret on the left. Here were the administrative offices on the left prior to and on the right following its restoration. Also in Kavala is a home that is known as Mehmed Ali's home. I don't think it ever was. I think it was possibly a family home belonging to his uncle. And I think it was probably the only time of his only visit to Kavala, shortly before he died, that he purchased it and had it rebuilt and stayed in it actually for the month that he was in Kavala, hence the attribution of it to Mehmed Ali. This is how it looks after its restoration. It is now open as a kind of museum, and it is well worth visiting. Inside the Külliye, it's divided into a series of courtyards. The first courtyard was that of the Medrese Hayriye and its hujre there, its cells for the students, This was a typical Islamic madrasa. It also, the domed building at the top here, the dome building at the top, often mistaken for a mosque, was not a mosque, but was in fact the dershane of the madrasa. You see it here on the right. It has a mihrab, because we know from the Vakfiyya, the endowment charter drawn up by Mehmed Ali, that it was used from time to time as a masjid, a small place of prayer for the students. You'll see in a moment why there was no need for a mosque. The second courtyard is another muhendishane, another madrasa, but this one is a muhendishane. That is a school of engineering. It was the third such school to be opened in Ottoman lands. The first was by Selim III, the second by Mehmed Ali in Egypt, and this was the third. Quite an impressive structure for a town of 2,000 people. One of the questions that immediately comes to mind when you see the extent of this facility, which, by the way, included a library of close to 11,000 very rare manuscripts, which in turn were transferred to the Egyptian government in 1930, and today make up the basis of the Egyptian State Library. They are the most valuable collection in that library. One of the first questions that comes to mind is, why? We know from his own accounts that Mehmed Ali had no education. He never set foot in a school. In fact, he proudly told visitors that he learned to read and write when he was 49 years after he'd been ruling Egypt for a long time. In other words, he was a self-made man. His father and grandfather before him in Kavala had served as a position we don't use much anymore today, Yol Ağası, which is a kind of armed night watchman guarding the streets, the roads in and out of the town. He himself went to work at a very young age, probably around 11 or 12, went to work for a French tobacco merchant from Marseille, a Francois Lyon, and that relationship, like many of Mehmed Ali's early relationships, continued a long time. After he became ruler of Egypt, he sent a ship to Marseille and invited Francois Lyon to come to Cairo. Unfortunately, the day he was boarding the ship, Francois Lyon died and never set foot in Cairo. The third courtyard is that of the imaret, or the soup kitchen, and also of a mektep, a kind of primary school for the School of Engineering. When Mrs. Missirian restored this facility, it was done with such care that rather than turn this room into an additional guest room, she chose to preserve what is known as the kiler, or erzak malzeme, the larder of the imaret hayriye, of the soup kitchen, and even went so far, if I recall correctly, to replace the large earthen jugs that were broken. One of the things that interested me after we had gotten to know one another, I did not promise to write a book about this, but I did tell Anna that I would write an article on the inscriptions, because the facility houses 4 magnificent inscriptions in verse, all of them done by very famous Istanbul calligraphers, and the poets who wrote the inscriptions are also well-known poets of the early 19th century. So there are 4 of these, marking this one marks the initial phase of construction. This is that over the door of the theological seminary, which is dated 1817 through 1818. This is the second courtyard, completed prior to June 25th, 1813. We know that because when one endowed a foundation of this sort, you built it. You didn't go looking for somebody else to give you the money. Once you built it, you did. And as we will see, this facility was paid for, its upkeep and maintenance was paid for by Sultan Mahmud II. There was also across the street from the facility, there was a very ornate, beautiful fountain, which has not survived. This is where that fountain was, which also had a very beautiful poem on its inscription. That inscription has not survived, but we know it from the divan, from the work of poetry by the poet who wrote it, who actually says in his divan, published by Mehmed Ali at the Bulak Press in Egypt, says above the poem, this is the poem I wrote for the fountain on Mehmed Ali's Külliye in Kavala. When the Egyptians gained control of this site in 2930, they sent a group to, I guess, record, among other things, photographically, just what it was that they had. And this is one of their photographs, and if you look carefully, you see that right across the street is a mosque. This is the Hussein Bey Jami, and I think it's certainly the reason that Mehmed Ali did not see fit to build a mosque in the facility itself, because the mosque was already there. There was simply no need for it. Just as a note, we do know that Mehmed Ali, in the Dershane, wrote into his vakfiye, his endowment charter, that on Friday nights, the teachers of the madrasa were to gather the up to 300 students who studied there, all of them with full scholarships. And it's not like a full scholarship to a university. Some of those people stayed there for 16 to 20 years studying. That the students were all to be gathered on Friday night for a Naqshbandi zikr. That is the zikr of the ceremony of the Naqshbandi order of dervishes, allowing us to at least speculate, in absence of any real proof, that Mehmed Ali was himself a Naqshbandi. Another sign of that is the Naqshbandi Dergah Zawiya in Cairo, which was built by one of his grandsons. And until Nasser, at least, was still in functioning. This is the inscription marking the second phase of construction. On the left, you can see by the arrow where it actually is located on the exterior of the building. Again, this by Yaseri Zadi, the calligrapher, a very famous calligrapher, who at exactly the same time he was doing these, was doing most of the inscriptions on the buildings of Mahmud II in Istanbul, many of which still exist today. In other words, when Mehmed Ali left Kavala to go as the second in command of a group of Bashi Bazouks, irregular soldiers, to Egypt I'm not good on dates, so the only thing I ever write down are dates. In 1801, he was the deputy commander of a group of 300 irregulars, Bashi Bazouks, and by that time, he had married. He married a wealthy widow who also happened to be his cousin from a village near Drahma, slightly to the north of Kavala, the village of Nusratli. She was a widow, but in a sort of strange circumstance. She was widowed on the day of her wedding. Somebody shot the groom. So the marriage had never been consummated. Mehmed Ali seems to have taken care of that in fairly fast form. While living in Nusratli, where he moved to his wife's village, he fathered 5 children. Emine in 1787, died in 1830. Ibrahim in 1789, who died in 1848. Ahmet Tosun, born in 1793, who died in 1816. Ismail, born in 1795, died in 1822, and Nazlı, who was also known as Hatice, born in 1799 and 1860. So by the time he left in 1801, he had fathered his first children. This is the inscription over the imaret. The imaret, the original site of that inscription no longer exists. It was here. But as we will see near the end of the talk, if you've been to Kavala, you know that up by the house, which is a couple hundred meters up the road, there is this gigantic, massive, very beautiful statue of Muhammad Ali on horseback. That was a gift from the Greek community of Alexandria, raised money, hired the sculpture. The only problem was that by the time it got there, there was no way to get it there. The road was too narrow. So to get that statue up the hill, they destroyed parts of the imaret. One thing that went was this original entrance to the actual soup kitchen itself. And also that went was this whole row of hujres. So now all you have left is this inner row on the street side. Today, the inscription stands over this doorway, but at least the inscription was preserved. There is a fifth inscription, which was until some time, I don't know, was it still there when you got this, or was it already removed?
It was removed, but we found it.
You found it because you have it preserved, and I saw it. This is simply an inscription over the last phase of the complex, which simply says it's the İmareti Hayriye Dairesi, the administrative offices of the soup kitchen. Dated 1864. So here you see the building in all of its phases. You had, first of all, the 1813 first courtyard, followed by a school, a mektep. Then the second courtyard, which was the Mühendishane, the School of Engineering, completed in 1821. Then the imaret section, completed about the same time. That's this area here. And finally, the administrative offices that were added in 1864. In addition, probably at the time of his visit, near the end of his life, he actually only visited Kavala after leaving it in 1801. He only visited it once, and that was in 1846. He was near his death, and it was a major surprise given the problems that he had had with successive Ottoman sultans when he announced to his officials in his government in Egypt that he was going on a visit to Istanbul. Nobody understood why. First of all, the Sultan was 12 years old. This is right at the time Abdülmecid had become Sultan. There was no apparent reason for him to visit Istanbul. My, I would say, theory, stronger than hypothesis, is that he did so simply because he didn't have permission to go to Kavala, which is where he really wanted to go. He did meet once with Abdülmecid. He stayed in a yayla in Ortaköy for close to a month. He sailed on his own ship, and then sailed to Kavala via Tekirdağ. You might ask, why Tekirdağ? This is a man of great complexity. In Tekirdağ, his predecessor as the Ottoman government of Egypt, a man that he did not get along with at all, Hüsrev Pasha, had retired to Tekirdağ. And for some reason, he stopped off to visit him for a couple days in Tekirdağ, and then went on to spend a month in Kavala, his hometown. So for the first and only time in his life, in this trip, in July of 1846, he visited the Ottoman capital, Istanbul, and he returned to his home place of birth, Kavala. While there, I think, I can't prove this, but I think he built very elaborate turbes for both his mother and father. This is the tomb, that's all that remains of the türbe of his mother, Zeynep Hatun. It's now in the gardens of the house. Originally, it stood right down by the port. This was it. It was there until the 60s. When was the colonel's coup in? 67. At that time, it was removed. The stone was preserved, fortunately. This is the original site. You see where the arrow is there, which even today is right in the heart of the town. Just behind the Selviac. There was also an inscription, which again leads me to think that this was the time it was probably built, that once stood over the doorway of the tomb, that is right here, in Ottoman Turkish and Greek, both Ottoman Turkish and Greek, which says that this was the tomb of Zeynep Hanım, the mother of the founder of the Egyptian dynasty. For his father, he built also a rather impressive tomb. His father was named Ibrahim Ağa, the son of Yol Ağası Ali Ağa, died in 1791. One of the interesting things studying Mehmed Ali is that he was almost Donald Trumpian in his capacity to tell whoever he was talking to whatever he thought they wanted to hear. So he would tell visitors, for example, that he was an Albanian. He wasn't. When he was in Egypt, after he arrived in Egypt, very shortly thereafter, he became commander of the only real Ottoman force in Cairo, which was a group of 500 Albanians who were real soldiers. And he often dressed in their uniforms, their garb. He told later visitors that he was an Albanian from time to time. The father's tomb was, again, quite spectacular. It too was destroyed in the 60s. We know exactly where it stood because if you look at this building, which was what, Mihalis, the municipality?
No, it's now the public municipality. It used to be the house of a tobacco trader.
If you look at that house and you play down from it, the site of that tomb would have been right about here. Fortunately, we do have the inscription preserved as well. When the Imaret was being restored, meticulous care was taken not to destroy anything. These are just a couple of about 10 examples of signs that mark the rooms for the various parts of the facility. This one is the Muallim Odası, the teacher's room. This one is the Hademi Odası, the caretaker's room. Also preserved the numbers on the cells, the hujres, where the students stayed. I just took this one with 6 of them, but there are lots more. And my favorite preservation was close to what, 200? Close to 200 mürekkepliks, inkwells, which were used by the students in the school. I was tempted to swipe one of these, but I never did on it. Among other things that were kept was a very interesting, quite early, 1866, Leclanche cell. Whether this was used as a teaching aid in the School of Engineering or actually used to ring bells, I'm not clear. And a portion of the archives of the Vakıf were also maintained. Not all of them by any means. The library, as I said earlier, went to Cairo. This was again the Mehmed Ali's home in Kavala in 1930. This was his first palace in Alexandria in Egypt, the Rasetin, and this is the first photograph, a daguerreotype, ever taken on the African continent. It was taken on November 7th, 1839. If you look at these two, there are certain similarities to the house in Kavala and the palace in Alexandria. One thing that's not obvious from this picture is that they face one another. That is, the house in Kavala looks right at Alexandria, and the Rasatine Palace looks right at Kavala. I think there can be no doubt that he had an endearing and lasting affection for his town of his birth. This is an interesting document from his 1813 Vakfiye, in which he informs that he has completed the first stage of construction. This is an even more interesting letter from March 30th, 1813, to Sultan Mahmud II, expressing his thanks for, it's not entirely clear, either the revenues or actual ownership of the island of Tassos. Why would Mahmud II in 1813 have given a very valuable piece of real estate to a breakaway governor in Egypt? The simple reason is one we're still living with today, and that was the Wahhabi uprising in what is today Saudi Arabia. When the Wahhabis took over Mecca and Medina, Mahmud had no army to send, and he had no choice but to beg Mehmed Ali, who sent an army under his son Tosun, who, by the way, wiped out the Wahhabis, captured all of their leaders, and when he was planning to execute them, an order came from Istanbul not to execute them, but to send them to Istanbul. So if Tosun had had his way, we probably would have no Wahhabism today, and the world would be, in my humble opinion, a far better place. Of course, being the Ottoman Sultan, after 2 months, they allowed all these guys free, and they went back and laid the grounds for what we are living with today. This is the statue that I referred to that was built to commemorate Mehmed Ali by the many Egyptians from, many Greeks from what is today Greece, worked in Egypt, particularly Alexandria, a group from Kavala, and they raised through a subscription this. This is actually my connection to Kavala. It started with Anna Missirian. Not entirely. It actually started, before I ever knew Anna, with this picture. This is the Hedayef Ismail's palace on the Bosporus in Emirgan. Just Atlikush would be behind it there on the hill, which was burnt. I found 2 different dates, either 1905 or 1911 was burnt. When my father-in-law built our apartment, where I still live today, and was excavating its foundations, he found himself in the kitchen of this palace, complete with ceramic tiled ovens and so on. So I feel a certain affinity to members of the family, simply because I live where I live and have been living there for a long time. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Evet, şimdi ikinci konuşmacımız Bayan Anna Missirian, aziz dostum ve o güzelim imaret binasını bugünkü haline getiren kişi. Bize bu imaretin macerasını anlatacak.
Thank you. The Külliye Imaret of Mehmed Ali continued to function as an educational center throughout the 19th century and ceased its activities in July 1902. Okay, I'll take it and I'll put it. Okay. I did something wrong. Ferda, I think I did something wrong.
Just close that.
This?
Close it, yeah.
Okay.
Put yours on top of it.
And this is what I tried to do without
Yeah, but you
success.
did when it was open.
That's right. Okay, thank you. The free provision of food to poor people, regardless of their religion affiliation, continued until 1923. On October 1912, the Ottoman troops retreated, and Kavala was occupied by Bulgarians who remained in the city until June 1913. During that time, a significant part of the complex's archives was stolen and transferred to Bulgaria. The Greek Navy expelled the Bulgarian forces, and following the Greco-Turkish population exchange in 1923, the complex was used to house refugees, as you said. In the late 1920s, the Greek government recognized the Imaret and the rest of Mohammed Ali's family lands as an Egyptian Vakif property. The reason for this recognition was the pressure exerted by the Greek-Egyptian community, being the most important part of the Greek diaspora, as throughout the dynasty the Greeks advanced, pioneered, and thrived. For us, Greeks, the open-minded policy of Mohammed Ali and his successors was the shelter and staff for the nostalgic Alexandria of Cavafy, Foster, and Daryl. After the nationalizations and during the Nasser period, Imaret and the rest of the properties in Kavala and Thasos became property of the Egyptian Vakif organization. The Külliye, Imaret, was first listed as a protected historical monument by the Greek government on March 4, 1954. The Greek Ministry of Culture and the Egyptian Embassy in Athens drew up plans for an extensive restoration program, but these plans were never implemented. In 1984, a series of intergovernmental agreements between Greece and Egypt were signed, which declared that the Külliye was to remain the property of the Egyptian government and that it would be restored as a site for common cultural activities. And these agreements, of course, were, like the rest of them, never implemented. Both monuments were left an empty shell which paid a high toll to the passing of time. And because of the lack of attention, the monument's condition continued to deteriorate. The combination of both man-made and natural causes, this contributed to the gathering speed of its dilapidation. Important decorative elements were stolen or disappeared, as did many of the contents of its one rich library and archives. Only the solid state of its construction prevented its complete ruin. Although it had long since lost its original function as an educational and cultural center, and now lay deserted, it still though remained an imposing landmark in the city of Kavala. In 1997, I proposed to the Egyptian government a long-term lease for restoring the monuments, following all the previous intergovernmental agreements. The Egyptian Vakif organization refused all potential contemporary uses without commercial interest. After 2 years of consultations and international bidding competition, the Egyptian organization conceded the Imaret and the Mohammed Ali's house to a pious Muslim entrepreneur from Saudi Arabia who had little to do with the restoration of monuments and with complete ignorance of the Greek legislation concerning cultural heritage. His suggestion to turn the Imaret into a food corner, along with an extra floor to the triangle courtyard, was not accepted by the Greek authorities. After an unfortunate incident causing the injury of a young student, a solution had to be found immediately to relieve the Egyptian organization, the owner, from criminal responsibilities. The enormous cost of restoration and the anticipated difficulties of obtaining license prevented interest from other investors, and in conclusion, I signed the lease with the Egyptian government, which at the same time relieved them of all their responsibilities. Of course, before restoration commenced, all the necessary steps were taken to comply with the strictest international conservation standards, as well as to be granted all the permits by the Central Archaeological Council in Greece and of the Greek Ministry of Culture. The restoration works started in November 2001 and were completed in June 2002. The project is the most important and costly of its kind undertaking by the private sector in Greece. The restatement works fully respected the original forms and structures of the complex, focusing on the principle to adapt Imaret to the new use with minimum restructuring. Furthermore, the aim was not to just restore the edifice per se, but to revive, if possible, the spirit and atmosphere of the original, to make it once again a site of education and hospitality. There have been no irreversible structural alterations. All the systems, plumbing, wiring, ventilation have been installed underground, and the original flooring of the logias in the courtyards have been preserved. Traditional materials were used and long-forgotten techniques were once again applied. The management was in constant consultation with many specialists to ensure the result would be historically correct, scientifically sound, and well documented. Conservation work was carried out in the very few painted remains. They were cleaned and firmly attached. Most of the metalwork has been left intact after being cleaned of corrosive agents. The lit sheets covering the domed roofs, crucial to the building's insulation, were replaced with traditional methods. The most demanding and complicated part of the restoration was the one in the administration area, which also features elements of timber secular constructions that they have been, of course, destroyed. Keeping and preserving as much of the original woodwork as possible, the unit was restored using techniques compatible totally with historical structures. The furnishing of the rooms later and the public areas has been designed in unison with the style and the era of the building. A water surface, that you will see later, has been created in the square courtyard, and together with the plants and orange trees make the complex a site of relaxation and meditation in the spirit of the great complexes we meet in the Islamic architecture. Imaret, in its original form, as well in its present situation, is a rare example in Europe, a masterpiece of late Ottoman architecture. The variety of decoration, the quality of the delicate details, the interaction between indoors and open spaces create an original complex of high aesthetic value. The works were inspected by the Greek Ministry of Culture, and the total cost has exceeded the sum of 8 million euros. The results have been highly acclaimed by Greek and international experts and the press. The revival of Imaret, though, caused several serious vibrations, starting with the local population, who at first felt at least uncomfortable. There were even people claiming that monuments should be protected and restored based on their national or religious significance. In that sense, the rebirth of an Ottoman edifice will bring back memories of the small town's Ottoman past. Like if replacing Imaret with some apartment buildings could change the history. There were also some intellectuals who denied the right of the monuments to be saved, being themselves victims of the illusion that Greek or Egyptian state will undertake the obligation to restore them and to give them back to the people to which they belong. It is impressive the fact that these very well-educated people did not realize that while waiting for this miracle to happen, Imaret was losing its capacity to afford even one more snowfall. And of course, the vibrations continued. Turkey, through an official diplomatic way, chose to challenge the legality of the process. The municipality of Kavala tried to intervene in the contract, while the Greek state adopted a dubious policy. At this point, I should also mention the reaction of the Cairo press, which suddenly remembered the monuments as an integral part of the Egyptian cultural identity, and focusing at the Greek Christian woman, who, by interpreting from the Egyptian people their past, allows at the same time the use of alcohol within a holy Muslim place. Through a remarkable synchronism, they all forgot the still existing pictures of the two monuments before the restoration. As in the meantime, the efforts and the cost was giving back to Imaret and the house of Muhammad Ali its previous glory, everybody seemed enthusiastic to use it now in its own way and for its own purpose. Of course, essentially, no great interest for the identity and the history of Muhammad Ali, nor cognitive deepening in the monument's symbolism, and a total misunderstanding of their geographical position. A very frequent procedure was trying to convince Egyptian Vakif organization representatives that Kavala is not an island across the Turkish coast, somewhere near Samos, I think they wanted it placed. Fortunately, in my country, the Ministry of Culture operates autonomously and shapes dynamically a peculiar status quo. Imaret is a monument of independent origin, and as such, its restoration is imposed. As all interventions are strictly controlled by the Central Archaeological Council, not specifically known for its innovative points of view, and if the restoration respects all absolute rules of the Greek law, it will be protected and completed, and of course it did. So, the first goal was a bit of a challenge. The first goal was achieved, and the two monuments were structurally saved, but the second goal, this of the educational center, was a bit of a challenge. Giving back to Imaret its original identity, it was not an easy task. Your poet, Rumi, mentions that when the student is ready, the teacher appears. And exactly at that moment that the two monuments were fully restored, and the main goal of the educational center seemed practically impossible, Heath Lowry appears. This complete presentation would have never been completed if it was not for my friend, the professor. He gave me from the very beginning all possible help and support and stayed by my side through difficult procedures. In 2006, a foundation was created aiming at actions inextricably interwoven with the very specific characteristic of its premises. Inspired by Muhammad Ali's policy towards culture, tolerant policy towards culture and religion, we realize that the cast of character who played some important role in building this world of science, art, and culture that we enjoy today is broader than we have been taught. One aspect of human history that is somehow overlooked, it is the contribution of the secular Muslim civilization to the shaping of the modern world. However, the acknowledgement of its contribution to the development of the world civilization remains a desideratum. The European community has now a Muslim population of around 20 million people. Greece's native Muslim population exceeds the 150,000, while outbreaks of Muslim communities are rapidly increasing in the West. Nevertheless, the North Atlantic educational curricula, excluding secular Islam, classical time, undermine the fact that from the 7th century, men and women from this part of the cultural world made exceptional achievements in science and culture. In our days, the image of Islam has been tarnished by Muslims themselves, and ultra-conservative cliques have violently concealed their ancestors' cultural and scientific achievements. Extremist thought has torn the fabric of intercultural unity. Young Muslims remain susceptible to social and religious isolation, as they are not invited to share the making of common history of humanity through the recognition of their own cultural past. In Europe, despite repeated rhetoric for unbreakable and stable ties with this part of the world, no important moves have been made to honor its heritage. And within that framework, the Mehmed Ali Research Center attempts to foster this gap and overcome past negligence through its activities. We all know deeply that at a time of increasing xenophobia and extremism, mutual recognition, acceptance, and respect between people, it's the only way to counter violence and fanatism that stand in the way of progress and development. It is now time we remember that there are two reasons why we simply cannot do without acclaiming this contribution to science and art in the construction of European cultural history. Namely, the unique opportunity to compare its assimilation of the same antique heritage, and because of the abundance of the two sides' historical interactions. Today, Imaret is not only an important remain of the past or a simple expression of human creativity, and it does not only radiate the values and vision of its creator. In 2014, the Greek state, through a decision of the Greek parliament, recognized the Mehmed Ali Research Center as the first and only official entity for the research of the Muslim civilization in Greece. Thank you very much.
Değerli konuklar, zannederim Kavala'daki bu imaretten alınacak çok ders var. Türkiye'de benzeri pek çok binamız keşke böyle bir işleve ve aynı zamanda da bir kültürel hizmete açık olabilse, bu biçimde olabilse. Bu imaret bize epey bir yol gösteriyor. Sorularınız varsa lütfen her iki konuşmacıya da yöneltebilirsiniz. Sorularınızı bekleyelim. Belki sonra bir ikramımız var. Arka tarafta sergiyi gezmeden. Belki o arada da belki Pardon. Buyurun.
I'm sorry, I think I missed the current status of the emirate right now. So what is it? What is it being used for?
It has a double identity. It covers the obligation of the commercial use through the contract within the Egyptian government, and the other part of the building, it houses the research center I mentioned. So it has a double identity. The rooms are most of the rooms are part of the hotel, but most of the places are part, including the house of Mehmed Ali Paşa, are parts of the research center.
Belki tekrarlayayım yüksek sesle de. Bu odaların, hücre olan odaların bir bölümü konaklamak için ayrılmış, onarıldıktan sonra. Ama binanın, külliyenin büyük bir bölümü bir araştırma merkezi görevini görüyor. Değişik seminerler, toplantılar yapılıyor. Biz de o toplantılardan birini gerçekleştirdik. Bu ilişkimiz de öyle başladı Bayan Anna Missirian'la zaten. Evet. Başka soru var mı? Zannediyorum yok. Ben sizlerin adına da her iki konuşmacıya da teşekkür ediyorum. Bize eşsiz bir örnek, bir de tarihimizin bir bölümü. Gerçekten çok ilginç bölümü. İki şahsiyet var böyle. Osmanlı'nın düşüş döneminde kendi birliklerini koruyan ve kendi gittikleri bölgeyi başka bir şeye çeviren bir tanesi ve en karakteristiği tabii Kavalalı. Mehmed Ali Paşa. Kitaplarla ilgili arka tarafta da bakabileceksiniz lütfen. Diğeri de tabii o da ayrı bir araştırma konusu. Yanyalı ünlü vali ve sonraki oradaki başka bir başkaldıran paşamız var. O da ayrı bir konferans konusu olabilir. Size çok teşekkür ediyorum. Bu yağmurlu havada lütfettiniz, geldiniz. İki konuşmacıya da öyle.